this session is kind of a summation of all the 7 sessions that we have done until now. Now, the 7 sessions that we have done have all been concerning the various statutes that are and laws that are applicable for the not-for-profits. Okay, uh, so we began with income tax, 2 sessions on income tax, and we saw various forms, various returns, various compliances that need to be done under TDS or wherever. And I think there must have been at some stage a query as to how do I remember so many of them. Then we went on to the CSR law. Of course, those compliances are with corporates. Then we went to the FCRA where we have compliances. Then we went to the securities law. If you are registered on the social stock exchange, you have compliances in terms of reporting. Then we went to the social securities law. Again, a lot of compliances in terms of each of the laws that we saw. We saw them in some detailing, but of course there is requirement. Now, then we went to the GST law. Some of you registered, some of you not registered, but doesn't really matter. Now, what today's session does is to kind of summarize all those compliances in 12 sheets, 1 sheet per month, and to tell you that this is what needs to be done as a not for profit. Okay, some depending upon the stage at which you are as an organization, all of them may not be relevant. However, whatever is relevant can become the guiding point from where you actually need to know. So basically what you're saying is that this compliance calendar, as a just like another calendar, is kind of a schedule, some kind of a structuring that we have given. Now you have a normal calendar where you have all the chuttis and all the religious events and festivals. Similarly, a compliance calendar says, well, we are giving you this schedule that displays all the compliances related dates and deadlines. Okay, now that is what this compliance calendar is. It's already there on Patic, and I've actually tried to bring it because I want to conclude the course by at this stage sharing with you what are these specific compliances, and therefore this is also some kind of a revision. So what are the obligations? What are the filings? What are the reports that are required by various regulatory bodies? Okay. Now, so you ensure that the compliances are done on time, that you are not defaulting. Okay. So your commitments are met. Now, why a compliance calendar? One is compliances, of course, in each period, say a month. So you don't have to remember what are the compliances in all the 12 months, but at least each reporting period or a month for that matter is something that you probably can look at uh, as a better uh, period of time where you can be more on top of things. It's an alert. It brings discipline. Basically, it ensures that you there is somebody who's telling you, well, this is the compliance that is required. It fixes responsibility and accountability of staff. Okay, so I'm saying accountability because then the ownership comes. It provides sufficient time. So once you know that this is the due date for compliance reporting, then probably you can work backwards and see how much time does it take. We are not accounting for the amount of effort that would go to compliances, but at least on the D day when the compliance has to be done, you probably are ready with that. Now, the last but not the least is, of course, penalties. It avoids penalties. We have been seeing that all the compliances, whether under income tax or FCRA or social security or any other law, these have been becoming very, very stiff, and they are becoming very, very harsh. So I think we to the point that it might even question the existence of an organization. So one has to be very, very clear in terms of understanding that we cannot default on compliances. Now, I was looking at the compliance calendar and probably saw that a bigger sized organization would have close to about seven compliances in a month, which means 7 days on which they might be actually busy doing compliances. But smaller organizations might have compliances which might range from 2 to 3 days in a month. However, understanding when they are due, and it's not rocket science. It's only to help you to have more grip on or more control in your organization. So I have done this one per month, I may not do each of these months, but we definitely like to see the ones where there are more compliances. And all that you have read in terms of forms and returns and those numbers that I, narrated to you are all there here as a summary. So while April has gone, um, I think we can look at June, or maybe we can maybe look at May. So for instance, what are the regular reporting requirements? Of course, we all know that seventh, we had seen the TDS session, and we had seen when is TDS to be deposited. Okay, we are not saying deducted. Deducted is in your books, but deposited is seventh. Okay, and this calendar, which is there also on Patek, has color coding in terms of what is monthly, what is quarterly, what is biannual, and what is yearly. Okay, so the next one is so if you're registered, so TDS, without a doubt, and please remember that TDS compliance is very, very important. So if you are availing services or even goods for that matter, then this is the due date normally, except for the month of March. Okay. In the month of March, the TDS requirement, if you see, is not on the 7th, but on the 30th of April. Okay. Similarly, the annual EPF form, that is the 3A and 4A, they have to be also filed on the 30th. These are specific requirements as far as April is concerned. Now, if we go to May, we saw TDS normally on the 7th. We saw we had seen the chapter on GST where we had talked about people as regular taxpayers and as QRMP, quarterly reporting, monthly payment taxpayers. Now, for them, uh, the reporting requirements for outward supplies, as I told you, as the GSTR1 and the GSTR 3B, which is the summary report, the deadlines are slightly different. But for the ones which are regular taxpayers, it's the 11th. Okay, it's the 11th of the next month. For the ones who are on quarterly under QRMP, it's actually on the 13th. Okay, so that is 13th is as a quarterly return, not as a monthly return. Similarly, the 3B is, which is your summary return, which has both outward, inward, and your inputs, giving the the tax that needs to be paid. The 20th is the GSTR 3B deadline uh, for regular taxpayers. Well, whereas for the QRMP taxpayers, X category or Y categories, the dates are 22nd and 24th. Okay, so that is what has to be seen. Now, in the month of May, there are other requirements. Of course, the form 10BD and the 10BE, which is your basically your statement of donation and your donation receipts. That is what needs to be generated on for that particular year, for the previous particular financial year, on the 31st of May, as you can see. Okay, and of course, for the quarter ended March, which is the Q4 of the previous financial year, the due date for the quarterly returns is 31st of May. Then there is also the requirement relating to the Form 1A, which is the annual reporting requirement for uh, entities which are registered on the social stock exchange with the respective exchange. Okay, so that's in Form 1A. If you were registered on the social stock exchange. So these are some of the reporting requirements. They will get repeated in the next month. Again, the 15th uh, then for the there's 15th where the ESI and the EPF uh, contributions for the previous month have to be deposited. This is on a month-on-month basis. For the month of May, for the previous half year, that is October to March 2025, for instance, then you have to actually submit the half yearly return. So the ESI return, as we had seen in our social security laws section, is on a half yearly basis. Okay, that's the return, and on the 15th, there's the contribution. The EPF contribution is on a month-on-month basis. On the 15th, the ESI also. So if you see this calendar, and if you were normally a TAN holder and deducting TDS, the TDS on 7th, okay, the EPF and ESI on the 15th, something which is fairly routine. Okay, that will be every month. If you are registered under GST, depending on whether you are regular or under QRMP, monthly or on QRMP, then the GSTR 1 and the GSTR 3B will be different dates. Okay, that will also be there. Other than that, for instance, on 31st March, you have the Q4 TDS, but you have this as a one-time requirement every year. You know that 10BD and 10BE, which we have studied when we had talked about donations, statement of donation and donation receipts. The annual requirement is for registered entities with the social stock exchange is also once in a year. Now, normally, the dates get extended for the annual reporting requirements on social stock exchange. I come to June, where of course it gets repeated. Where it changes is of course the form 16 and 16A that you need to submit to furnish to the respective people whose tax you have deducted. Other than that, the TDS, GST1 and GST3B are the requirements. Okay. Then you have the DPT3, which is basically requirement for purposes of deposits for a company, and the annual impact report, which is if you are registered on the social stock exchange. So when we had seen the securities law section, then we had seen uh, the annual impact report as a reporting requirement. Where did we see that? We were seeing that in the LODR, the listing obligation and disclosure requirements. So for an entity which is registered on the social stock exchange, there are two disclosures. Of course, other than the materiality disclosures, which is as and when basis. But there are two annual requirements, the one which we saw on 30th of May and the one which we are seeing on the 30th of June. The 30th May is basically your annual reporting, and the 30th June is basically your annual impact report, which is issued by by a social auditor. Okay, so we have seen this. So in June, for instance, you have these as standard requirements. Again, coming to July, uh, we have TDS and GSTR. Okay, and of course the TDS return for the first quarter. Not much of compliances in the month of July. So currently running June, we have, if you're registered on the social stock exchange, then you have a reporting requirement. Other than that, TDS, GSTR, ESI, EPF, and of course the issue of 1616A. Okay, that's a requirement because you have filed your Q4 return on 31st of May, and therefore the 16 and 16A can be generated by the 15th. All right. Uh, so it's not something which is very difficult. I think some of these compliances are getting repeated month on month, and it's not difficult to remember those dates and say, well, compliances are a big burden. I don't think, as long as we think that the compliances are burdensome, they will become burdensome. As long as we rationalize them, we regularize them, and we ensure that the compliances are done. Here the compliance is not just compliance. The reporting of whatever is your data in terms of compliance is equally important, because it's the GIGO principle: garbage in and garbage out will come. So you have to be also on top of the way in which the data or detailing that has to go, because then whatever action is taken by the regulatory bodies will be based on the information that has gone, and the information has to be accurate and perfect and correct and relevant, so that your the decision or actions that are taken by these authorities is also clear. Now coming to, so July, this is only the uh, the June quarter TDS returns is on 31st. We all know that the following months I have not put the TCS bit, but the TCS bit, if you are a tax collector, then it's on the 15th. Okay, so 15th of the following quarter. Okay, following the quarter, just like TDS, instead of the 30th to the 31st. Now in August, for instance, what are the changes? August, you have the 9A and 10, which is 31st of August. Here there is some ambiguity because the law talks about 31st, but there was some circular that had come where they had said that even if the 9A and 10 are filed prior to the filing of the ITR, that will be all right. But there is no date, that year that was specified in the circular. So However, the law very clearly says 9A and 10. Now, 9A is for deemed application and 10 is for accumulation, where you were not able to utilize 85% of your income. You remember that? So if 15% was something that you can set aside for your objectives, the 85% of your income has to be utilized. However, if there is a shortfall in 85% utilization, you still have the benefit of deemed application or accumulation as the decision you might want to take depending upon the circumstances for the non-utilization or non-application, and the filing date is 9A and 10. Here also there is this ESI, EPF, TDS and GST compliances. Nothing more. I mean, there's nothing very much to actually uh, fear in terms of reporting in terms of compliances. And this calendar or this particular slide presentation brings all those compliances at one particular point of time. Now, coming to September, of course, 30th September is somewhat more important because here you have to give the directors uh, a Director 3 form, which is the KYC for the director. If it's a Section 8 company, you have to file your Form 10B and your Form 10BB, which is your audit report. Okay, you remember we had talked about 10B and 10BB when we were talking about returns and forms under income tax. So we had talked about 9A, we had talked about 10, we had talked about 10BD, 10BE, we had talked about 10B, which is for organizations with turnover and foreign contribution and or application outside India, and where the organization does not, in that case it will be 10BB. Okay, and we had seen what the 10B and 10B audit report formats are, which are now the revised formats. Then also on the 30th of September, you have your 10AB to be filed for purposes of renewal of your 12A registration and your 80G approval. Okay, because most of the organizations that were having a registration as on 1st of April 2021, they have got uh, uh, re-registration and reapproval for a period of 5 years, which is expiring on the 31st of March 2026. Now, we have to file the renewal form 6 months prior to the date of 31st March 2026, as you will see in your form number 10AC. So this is a very important date in terms of compliance. So your 10AB, your 10BBB based on whatever is your situation, and of course your if you are a Section 8 company, the director's KYC. Now, other than that, the compliances are the same. So you have the TDS compliance, you have the ESI EPF 15, and you have the GST 1, GST 3B compliances, depending upon whether you are, I didn't mark 13th here on September. So 11th, GST 1, outward supply return, if you are under monthly scheme or regular as a regular taxpayer, and 13th, if you are under the QRMP scheme. So we had seen in our session, GSTR1 has to be filed for the QRMP. It's on the quarterly basis, although you can use the IFF or the invoice furnishing facility for reporting invoices so that the other person can take credit of input. But then if you are we saw when can you be a QRMP dealer and when a normal dealer, we had seen that. So 13th will be the 13th following the previous quarter, the 11th will be the previous month. Okay, remember that. The GSTR1 again monthly, the GSTR1 3B monthly for normal payers, that's the 20th, and the payment of GST on the 20th. But if you are a QRMP one, then the GSTR 3B can be depending upon in which category you are on the 22nd or the 24th. So very simple. I mean, there's nothing very tough about it. However, every month there will be some difference in terms of compliances which we should be mindful of. Now, 10AB, if that is something that needs to be filled up by 30th of September, then our work, you have to decide what is the resources availability in your department or function and or your organization, and how much time will it take for filing this 10AB on 30th of September. That is what this calendar also helps you. How much time to prepare? 10B and 10BB, is your audit complete? Is the audit report, 10B is a huge form. 10BB equally, lengthy, but not as much as 10B, and the involvement of the auditor. So you will need to ensure that you are able to complete this form filing. So this calendar always will keep you giving an alert that, well, this is the last date. There must be a change in the date or an extension. We are not accounting for that in this calendar at this point. However, we need to be mindful of the dates. Then on 31st, if you're looking at October, then we are of course looking at uh, suppose we are assuming that the AGM of a company will be completed on the 30th of September, which is the due date. Also, for any of us, basically a society, a trust doesn't have that kind of a requirement. So if this ADT one, that is the green one that you're seeing, is basically for appointment of auditor by a Section 8 company. So within 15 days, you'll have to file this form. Okay. The AOC form 4 is also for a Section 8 company. This is the filing of the annual financial statements. Just as you file your annual financial statements for a society, the MCA requires you to file the annual financial statements along with in form AOC 4. Then the TDS, the quarterly TDS for September on the 31st. Okay, that's something that is there. So every quarter you will have, except for for the fourth quarter, where the due date is 31st May, 2 months. Since the due date for deposit for Q4 is 30th April, therefore the due date for of the quarterly returns is 31st of May. However, in all other cases, it's the 7th and the last date of the following month following the quarter. Okay, so that's something that you'll have to remember. Now, the ITR 6 and 7, okay, is the due date on 31st October. So we saw audit reports getting filed on the 30th of September. The ITR due date is for ITR 6, which is for Section 8 company, ITR 7 for all entities which are granted, which are getting the Section 11 and 12 benefit. When do you get Section 11 and 12 benefit? When you are registered under 12, registered under 12 AB, because then you will get the benefit of Section 11 and 12. Otherwise, you will not be able to file this form number ITR 7. Okay, that we had seen. We had seen in the second session. So you can go back to the sessions and see for yourself what these compliances actually are. But these are the compliances, nothing, not something which is, I am only now referring to compliances which are different from the previous months. Okay. So ITR 6, ITR 7, ITR 6, if you are a Section 8 company, your due date is 31st October. So is your due date for if you are getting the benefit under Section 11. Of course, the quarterly TDS return is all right. The TDS deposit is all right, 7th. The ESI EPF, again, standard 15th. The GSTR 1 and 3B, standard due dates. If you are registered under GST, if you're not, then don't bother. Similarly, if you are a Section 8 company, then you have the requirement of the AOC 4 and the ADT 1. All right. And you had the requirement of the directive KYC on 30th of September. This is assuming that you have your AGM on the 30th. अगर उससे पहले होगा तो ये ड्यू डेट्स शिफ्ट हो जाएंगे because it's 15 days and 30 days. So these, if you have it on the 15th of October, September, then these dates will shift 15 days earlier. That is what I just want to say. So we are presuming that the AGM for a Section 8 company has been done on 30th of September, and therefore the due dates, the markings are considering that as a due date, and of course also in the following months. So this is your requirement as far as October is concerned. Now coming to November, the only requirement is in terms of the again the requirement is in terms of the MGT1 uh, and the investor education and protection fund detailing. That's again the MGT7 and IEPF1, which is applicable for a Section 8 company. So MGT7 is basically on the 30th of November, assuming that 30th September the AGM was held. This MGT7 is basically the annual return. So for a normal Section 8 company, what are the reporting requirements? Normal reporting requirements is your AGM being held, then the ADT1, the appointment of the statutory auditors, Do we have such a requirement for societies and trusts? Unfortunately, no. And that's what makes the entire, thing get here and there, and we get uncomfortable. The AOC 4 is the annual financial statements that have to be filed, and the MGT 1, MGT 7 is basically the annual return. So these are the three compliances, and of course the director KYC, which are specifically for Section 8 company, but they're not applicable for us. Then the ITR 5, if we are an AOP, BOI, or an artificial judicial person, ADP, then ITR 5 has to be filed, and that is on the 30th of November. So these are dates which are different from the normal dates that you would have seen for others. Now, similarly, for the April to October 6 months, we had seen that the ESI reporting, not the contribution. The six we have a, the contributory period for ESI is 6 months. So April to October to March, we had seen our reporting was in May. Similarly, for April to October, our reporting is in November. Uh, uh, in November, that you are seeing on the 12th of November. Okay, 12th of November for the period April to October. ठीक है? The EPF annual reporting requirement is only once in a year. That is on the 30th of April. We have already seen that. Now, other than that, the TDS, the ESIC, the EPF, and the GST, all reportings continue to be the same. Now, I don't think we should be frightened unduly by these so-called 4, 5, 6 days. I think TDS will be fairly routine because the moment you deduct it, you have to deposit it with challan. Similarly, for EPF, ESI, if you are already registered and the contribution has to be deducted, it's part of the normal payroll. It will all flow based on the way you have put your accounting, payroll, and your systems. If the systems are throwing out the data uh, appropriately at appropriate point, if you have closed your month on the 30th and you have to deposit the TDS on the 7th, you have 7 clear days to ascertain which are the where how much TDS was deducted and how much has to be deposited. It's not something very great. Similarly, you have about 15 months, 15 days for deposit of EPF. Okay, if you're closed on the 30th. So if you're GST registered, we have seen the entire process. It's very, very seamless as it is called. So nothing very great needs to be, done. As long as at the back end, our systems and accounting procedures. So this entire thing that needs to be done hinges on the fact that our accounting data, our record entry, our bookkeeping, and our summarization is in such a fashion that these due dates can be adhered to, and there is sufficient time for that. Okay, so that's something that I just wanted to also mention. Now, coming to December, nothing besides the normal ones that you are seeing there. On the 31st of November, December, you have, of course, the FC4. ये तो सबको ही पता है, okay? And you also have the GSTR 9. We had seen where GSTR 9, the annual return has to be filed. Uh, in which cases it has to be filed. We had seen that in the GST session. So GSTR 9 is your annual return that has to be filed, and in December 31st, we all know that all FCRA registered entities have to file their annual return in FC4 for the previous financial year by 31st of December. Okay. Other than that, those are all routine uh, markings. What are those routine markings? TDS, EPF, ESI, and GST. All right. So in the month of December, those are the ones which are slightly different. Your FC4. Now, your FC4 also means that if your FCRA audited financials have been done, I am not saying that you wait up to 31st of December to file your FC4. If your audited financials, please remember that your audited financials, your audit report has to be submitted by 30th of September. From September 30th, when your audit report is already kind of, done, signed. Sometimes I find that the audit report has been signed, and the AGM is held after that date. And for instance, the audit has been signed off by the management on 15th September, and the audit report and the AGM adopts it on 30th of September. So many organizations I find, they don't even realize what is the authenticity or the and I don't know why the auditors also don't point that out, because the auditors should insist that the approval of the audited financials has been accorded, which is one of the main statutory business of the general body. That's something that I see. So theoretically, if the audit report was filed on the 30th of September, then you have cleared 3 months to file your FC4, and it's not necessary that you file it on 31st December. What I'm trying to what I'm trying to actually say is that the these are the last date. So as organizations, we also need to remember that we do not wait for the last date. Now, coming to January, the only difference in the month of January is, of course, your annual POSH report and your form number 25 basic 24 basically for the Contract Labor Act. The principal employer has to give this if you are employing contract labor through contractor. Okay, so these are the two, and of course the third year, the Q3 TDS return. So the Q3 TDS, the return has to be filed on the 31st. So if we look at the changes in the month of November, in the month of January, there is only the change in as on 31st of January. Other than that, again, TDS, EPF, ESI, GST, same dates, same dates, except the Q3 returns for TDS have to be filed on the 31st of January, which is again, if you have deposited everything on time, and if you have made the return in time, 31st January. The annual POSH return. So we had seen the Prevention of Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act. Okay, and we had seen that you need to constitute a internal complaints committee. Of course, having the policy, POSH policy, is a statutory requirement. So it is not linked to the number of employees. But if your number of employees is more than 10, then it's mandatory to have the internal complaints committee. The internal complaints committee will make the POSH return, and that report has to be filed with the management and with the district authorities. That's what I'm referring to. Similarly, if you are a principal employer and you are engaging contract labor, then under the Contract Regulation and Abolition Act of 1940, this is the return form that you need to file. The February, nothing actually changes. Okay, it's the same kind of requirements that are there as far as reporting is concerned. All right. In the month of March, again, nothing very much, because the same kind of change reportings that need to be done routinely are to be done. So if you see what are the reporting requirements, the reporting requirements are on account of TDS, on account of income tax, and the various income tax returns that are to be filed, the TDS deposit dates and the TDS quarterly return dates. The ITR dates are dates that we have all seen when we were talking about forms and returns. If we are registered under GST, then definitely the GST one and the R1 and the R3B is to be filed. Now, after this, we have just tried to collate what all these returns mean and what are the penalties. I don't need to talk much about penalties, but I this is only a summary to explain to you what each of these returns means, which we have seen on the calendar. Okay, so this calendar these are explanatory slides to each of these things. GSTR1 का मतलब क्या होता है? But we have seen it in our sessions, but I've still copied it here to kind of help you to see what it means. So if you are registered under GSTR1, GST, you have a GST, then this is something that you would know and you will be filing. Even if you are not, at least understand how the GST mechanism works. And at some point of time, you might be working in organizations which may have a GST number, and you will struggle to then say. The ITR is, of course, the ITR 7, the ITR 5, the ITR 6, the form number 9A and 10, which we have already seen in detail, and I have put down the due dates for each of them. Now, if we were to theoretically consider 31st August for the due date for 9A and 10, where a relaxation definitely is available, then you would, we are wondering that your audit should get completed somewhere by mid-August and your adoption should happen because the 9A and 10 will also be, calculated based on the audited figures in terms of your computation. So remember this also very clearly. All right. So what I'm trying to say is that if you are able to even keep this, I would suggest ask each of your accounts person, whosoever is sitting on the workstation, to take out a print of the calendar for each of the month, and this explanatory thing is permanently there so that they can always refer to this and they don't need to refer to the penalty side of the right hand side. I always look at the brighter side rather than say penalty. I have never talked of penalty. I have only talked about compliances and deadlines. Okay. So where is the question of penalty if the compliances are done and the deadlines are met? There's no need to talk about penalty. Why should I talk about 10 BD and say 200 rupees every day up to the time, up to the amount of, whatever is the amount that you have shown as donation? It's not the right thing to think about. But the right thing to think about is by 31st May, I should have been working backwards. So, for instance, we saw 31st May is your 10 BD deadline, and for the entire financial year, that is 31st of March. Now, between 1st of April to 31st May, you have to do this recce and to see that your part B of the 10 BD form is mirroring the data that you are collecting in an Excel sheet. And that's the Excel sheet that you have to, export in a certain sense to that particular 10 BD form. Other data in the 10 BD form is all, routine and nothing needs to be done. So from 1st April up to 31st May, and do we need to wait up to 31st May? No, if all our donation details are there, we should not be waiting for 31st May. All right. So that is something that probably for each of your accounts people, and make it their responsibility that there cannot be a default in terms of reporting on that deadline or even earlier if that is permitted. Coming to Form 10BB and 10B, the Form 10B and 10BB, you all know this is the 30th September. 30th September. This is also dependent on completion of audit and the issue of the audit report by the auditors. The 10BD and the 10BE, we have just talked about this. When it comes to Section 8 companies, I have already talked to you about the AOC 4, the MGD 7, the ADT 1. The DPT 3 is basically for deposits, the MGT one for material changes, the Director 3 KYC. Okay. So those are some of the other forms that are applicable. Now, people are asking me, we have a Section 8 company, can we look at what the compliances are? All these compliances for a Section 8 company are already there. And therefore, now you might be also realizing why a Section 8 company is considered to be better in terms of perception versus a society and a trust. Because you will find that do we have reporting requirements for appointment of statutory auditors? When I do due diligence, I see organizations which were formed in 2001, 2002, and for the last 25 years, they have hung on to the same auditor. The auditor himself or her or itself, rather, the firm itself does not have not for profit practice, does not keep itself abreast with what are the changes, and there are so many lacuna, so many, the 10 ITR 7 that is filed, there are demands coming, there is defective return because of the fact that you are not up to date. Our intention in these 7-8 sessions is exactly to tell you, while do not look at considering yourself as the practitioner, but at least be as close to the practitioner to see that your interests are protected. At the end of the day, if there's a demand in income tax, who's going to pay that demand or who's going to contest that demand? Again, there is time, effort. When you have demands, your TDS refund, if there is a refund for TDS, when it comes to renewal of your registration, all of them get into problems. Who suffers? You suffer as an organization, is what I'm actually trying to say. So one doesn't have to start filling up form number 10B or 10BB or ITR 7. But at least once a form has been pre-filled or filled rather, sorry, filled, at least preview the form and ask questions as to what this particular thing means. If you ask questions and those are actually corrected, then probably at the time of CPC summary assessment, those mistakes will not happen. There's not going to be any demand. There's not going to be any ineligible expenditure. All that is something that you will have to also at some point of time see. Why do we look at, do we have a situation where we have to file anything like an ADT1? No, in society or trust, nobody is even asking whether there's a rotation of auditors also or not. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, that same auditor, same audited financials ka layout, the layout is archaic, means there have been changes in terms of presentation. Unfortunately, we still don't have a standardization in presentation of financial statements in this country for charitable institutions, except of course for the section 8 companies. But there is nobody asking whether you have changed your auditors for 20 years or not. Now, if for 20 years the auditor has got used to the way, uh, you are looking it at the other way, which is not the right way. You are saying, well, this auditor is something that he has got used to it. He is not going to eat our head much. But also, please remember, he is not also getting you to the best of practices. That's something that I would want to tell you. So these are some of the compliances and the detailing, okay, of each of these compliances. Provident fund, we have seen 3A, 3B, which is the annual compliance. Then the TDS returns, which are the quarterly returns, and the TDS challan, the Tier 281 challenge, which we have already seen, the ESI forms. Basically, this is the 6 monthly reporting, and of course, the reporting relating to contract labor regulation and organization act, which is very little for not for profits. The annual POSH returns. Okay, so basically 31st of January is the annual POSH return that needs to go. So there is a template for the POSH return that needs to be filled by the IC, not by management. The IC has to make this report, and the report has to, be filed with management. Okay, that is how it is. The Maternity Benefit Act, there are forms that have to be filed. Okay, and of course the Societies Registration Act. Now, why I mentioned Societies Registration Act, because the Trust Act, except for states which have charity commissioners and state acts where there is filing requirement, other states do not have a requirement relating to annual filing for trusts. So you can also understand that there's virtually no control on reporting and compliances for trusts other than, of course, the income tax or the FCRA. But the incorporation law does not cast any requirement as far as reporting is concerned. Of course, the Societies Registration Act, again, I would say trusts where there is a trust act, yes, and where there is an active uh, charity commissioner, for instance, in Gujarat, Maharashtra, partly in Rajasthan, is where there is that requirement. Otherwise, the trusts are fairly free from any incorporation or constitution related compliances. As far as societies are concerned, the Societies Act or the State Societies Act do specify that annually by this date, within 30 days of close of the annual general meeting, the report relating to the board and the annual financial report has to be given. But generally, I have seen that they do not acknowledge, do not give an acknowledgement, they just receive it. So there's no kind of standard rules and procedures for annual reporting under Societies Act. Also, sometimes in some states the societies registrars now have made it online, where you can submit it online and you get an acknowledgement. Sometimes you do not get it. So in terms of constitution laws, of course, the section 8 has very specific requirements, although there are relaxation in terms of various provisions of the Companies Act, in terms of the section 8 company, in terms of board meetings, in terms of various other things. But there are, at least as far as the statutory requirements are concerned, in terms of annual financial statements getting filed, the annual return getting filed, the statutory auditor details annually being filed, and so on and so. Any major material changes that happen have to be, the directors' KYCs have to be up to, otherwise there are penalties. So those are some things which make the Section 8 companies slightly superior in terms of perception between the three forms of organization under which charity can be done. So I think with that Of course, the FCRA, the form FC4, you all know that now. Um, and the forms under the 3 form under the FC3 series, the 3 ABC, and of course, I forgot mentioning about the form in the series 6, which is 6A, B, C, D, E. Okay, and we've seen them in the CRA section um, completely in terms of what each of these forms are. Okay, right from form FC1 to 2 to 3 ABC to form FC4, which is the annual return. We don't have anything like 5, the 6A to E, and of course, form FC7, which is the form for surrender of certificate of registration. So today's session is slightly uh, uh, getting completed because this is the topic that we wanted to do. And this I'm going to share with you. I would urge that the entire discussion in the last 7 months is actually coming up onto the compliance calendar. And this is culminating into a clear understanding in terms of what compliances have to be done. So with that, I'm stopping this presentation. Today is our last session. So key takeaway from this compliance calendar is essentially giving you that alert. Okay, I don't know how you can do it. Shamir was saying you can even put it as a Google Calendar. You can convert it into a Google Calendar. I would suggest you customize the calendar based on what is applicable to you, so that the entire laundry list doesn't look like being too much of a burden. However, for normal organizations, which are small, medium organizations, I don't think the number of compliances days that are there are going to be more than 2 to 3. And of course, the more important thing is for this calendar compliance, how many days backwards do you start working is something that will be more critical in terms of ensuring that on the due date at least, or even some of the cases even earlier than the due date. Nobody says that you have to deposit the TDS on the 7th only. If you deposit the TDS on the 1st, nobody is going to say anything to you. So it will depend on how good, robust your manpower and your systems are, accounting, financial, in terms of ensuring that you are able to have sufficient time not only to prepare but also to scrutinize, so that whatever data goes correctly. I want to also say that with a lot of this analytics working, with a lot of automation working, there is very little that can be done if there is mistake. So the calendar just doesn't help you give dates, but it also helps you to move backwards and give yourself enough time, your teams enough time to be able to scrutinize prior to submission. Okay. So with that, I will end this session. If there are any questions, you can, I don't know, I just want to see if there's a question. What's the uh, Khushbu, there is no problem with the 10, 16A, 16B, 16A and 16 being not being given. However, what happens is that 16A is basically meant for vendors and consultants. They anyways will see their TDS on their 26AS returns. Okay. However, form number 16 is meant for employees. They would want to see that because they might not be able to understand the 26AS, and therefore they would insist on the 16, or they may say that they whenever they talk to their chartered accountant, he will say, well, get a copy of the 16. Okay, although all the details will be there in the 26AS. Why 16 is also to see that there is no mismatch between 16 and 26AS. So it's good to give the form, the annual, the 16A, so that if there is a difference between 16A and the 26AS data, it can be corrected, or at least action can be taken. While filing Form 10AB for renewal of 12A, it shows to upload 3 years financials, which are 23, 24, 24, 25, and 25, 26 correct. No, I think 24, 25 is what they're going, 24, 25, not 25, 26. Okay. Now the 23, 20, 22, 23, 23, 24, and 24, 25. This should be ready. One thing. Second thing is, please see in 23, 24, and 24, 25 what was your turnover, and therefore the 5 year renewal or 10-year renewal is what is going to get directed. uh, no, this 3 years is 22, 23, 23, 24, and 24, 25. 25, 26 cannot be there because the return has to be report has to be filed. Uh, um, mm, yeah, so somebody stars has already mentioned that. That's what I was just wanted to say, that it is until 25. And again, please remember the cutoff of 25 in the revision in the changes that have been made for 5 years, 10 years, is the 23, 24 financial year income, and 24, 25 financial year income will decide your 5 year or 10 year eligibility as far as renewal is concerned. So these are the questions that are there. Are there any other question that you have? So you can unmute and ask those questions. Anything now concerning any of these 8 sessions, people want to have a word, people can unmute and make a comment or something. Or if there are any questions that you might want to ask, I would also request that the PATIC as a resource may please be used. Please also ask questions. Please also share your views. Please also let us know how we can improve. Nobody wants to make a comment or say anything.
For very useful session. Patrick's site also looks very interesting. Uh, One feedback is, sir, so there are few charitable objectives, right? And there are non-profit which are into specific objectives. Some are into education, some are into medical relief. So those specific industry specific, some compliance can be included. Uh, that will be useful, sir.
No, so Kim, I don't understand. When it comes to charitable objects, okay, you will choose an object based on the area in which you want to work.
Correct.
However, once you have chosen the object, okay, the object does not drive compliances. The statutes and the rules drive compliances irrespective of whether you are into education. So if you are into education, is your ITR 7 going to be different? Is your 10P going to be different? Is your 10PD going to be different? No. What drives what drives compliances is the acts and the rules and the regulations. What drives your activity or your passion, as I call it, is what is your objects. However, what we need to understand is that whatever objects we are selecting, our activities, our reporting, our data should corroborate that object. So when I have been talking about you in
Yeah.
terms of synergy or symmetry of objects in various, as you work in income tax, or as you work in FCRA, or as you work in CSR, or as you work in securities law, all of them have you whenever you might wherever you are working, this particular object should drive all your activities under all of these laws, is what I'm actually trying to say. Because it cannot be that you are working in education, but when it comes to taking in the FCRA registration, you are registering yourself as religious. That is something that has to be considered when you are clearly understanding your objects. And it's not you, the entire organization, everybody must understand what this organization stands for in terms of its goals and objectives. And it comes from the mission, vision, okay, and of course the values that you inculcate among these people. It's a much broader part. What I'm only trying to say is that once you have selected, so if you have selected GPU, of course, the compliance will be different in terms of the 20%. In terms of your understanding of business incidental, you have to be more careful because the reporting for GPU is going to be more in your 10B and your ITR. Why? Because it has been misused. However, when you are doing education and you're very clear, this is my core activity and I do incidental business. So you are doing education, taking fees is your business, as your charitable activity. But giving, running a mess, running a bus, running a something, a hostel, is something which is business incidental, because that's not directly the outcome of education. That has to be understood. So I think I'm been able making you
Yeah.
people understand what we are trying to what I'm trying to say. So the object is immaterial. Once the object is selected, the object symmetry in terms of various laws is something that you have to ensure. Sometimes we lose track of that in our effort to chase the money. Even if we have to chase money, look at ways in which the objects are, held sacrosanct. I mean, you holding the objects as primary, because at the end of the day, anything which is not your object is also something which probably can lead you into trouble. Okay.
Yeah.
uh, mm,
Yeah.
that is what we have seen, cancellation of your 12ab registration.
So I'm coming from a point that, sir, see, the same umbrella may have two entities. One objective may be into education, other one it is into medical relief, right? So the basic calendar which you showed, it is applicable to both. But then when it comes to specific medical relief, there could be some more compliances, maybe there, which we are not clear. That's something I was asking.
So I am saying this is the statutory regulatory compliances. If you are into
Mhm.
medical relief and running a medical institution for that matter, or an educational
Mhm.
institution of that matter, for that matter, you will
Mhm.
have their respective medical, uh, medical, the legal provisions in your relating to
Mhm.
running a medical
Mhm.
institution in your state, or your getting the accreditation or registration from the MCI, as it is called, the Medical Council of
Mhm.
India, or getting the
Mhm.
registration of that hospital from the respective department. So also for your educational. Basically, if you're running educational institution or medical institution, that will be the case. However, if you're doing environment, how you're doing heritage, if unless you have to register for heritage, or you are doing relief to poor, generally those requirements will not be there. But if you're running institutions, okay, uh,
Mhm.
as service delivery mechanisms, or service delivery vehicle, then definitely if there are any laws related to not just the constitution but to the running of those institutions, that will be in addition to this calendar. However, your institution will have to follow this calendar as far as statutory regulatory compliances is concerned.
Got it. Very
Anybody
useful
else?
section, sir. Very useful section.
Thanks, KM.
Thank
any
you.
more any more feedback, anything that you would suggest uh, to add, delete? So, Madhuri is saying, my question is the compliance to work with the grassroots level organizations who are working in the remote areas. The solution to maintain the minimum compliance is supporting documents specifically for the people who are working in remote, specific and defined supporting confined. I don't, Madhuri, can you unmute and ask this question, Madhuri Pathak? What is it that you are asking us? आप क्या पूछ रहे हैं?
हेलो सर,
हाँ
मेरा
माधुरी।
मेरा क्वेश्चन है कि जैसे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन कई रिमोट एरियाज में भी काम करती है जहाँ पे
बिल्कुल।
विलेजर्स जिनका बहुत अंडरस्टैंडिंग नहीं है, लेकिन चूंकि एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को पूरा कंप्लायंस मेंटेन करना पड़ता है, तो किस लेवल तक हम लोग कंसिडरेबल सपोर्टिंग डॉक्यूमेंट्स हो सकता है जिसमें कंप्लायंस भी मेंटेन हो और ज्यादा रिमोट एरिया में जो लोग काम कर रहे हैं उनके ऊपर ज्यादा क्वेश्चंस भी ना हो और
माधुरी, एक मिनट में समझ गया। माधुरी, मैं आपको ये कहना चाहता हूँ, एंड दिस इज समथिंग दैट आई वांट टू टेल यू। All throughout our sessions, I have told you that compliances are not so difficult. That we have not been compliant is the problem. We have not complied. We have defaulted in compliance. इसलिए सरकार अगर थोड़ा पीछे पड़ रही है तो हमको दर्द होता है. That's what pains us. I am only saying, even if we are, and that is the big advantage with these online sessions, I can reach you anywhere. So the those areas which are remote, today technology is available. Today everything is online. Today everything related to resources is also available online. मैं तो कहता हूँ कि आज के दिन जो रिमोट एरियाज के अंदर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन काम कर रही हैं, उनको जो एडवांटेज आज है कभी पहले नहीं था, बिकॉज टेक्नोलॉजी हैड नॉट गॉन, ऑटोमेशन हैड नॉट गॉन, द इंफॉर्मेशन कुड नॉट हैव बीन शेयर। आपका क्वेश्चन ये है कि कितना डॉक्यूमेंटेशन करना है। आज आपके पास टैली सॉफ्टवेयर है, तो उसके साथ में ये मैं नहीं बता सकता कि एक वाउचर के साथ आप क्या क्या लगाएंगे, वो मेरा इस सेशन का काम। बट अगर कोई ट्रैवल का वाउचर है तो उसके साथ में आपकी पॉलिसी क्या कहती है, उसके साथ में आपने ट्रैवल किया है या नहीं किया है, ऑल दैट, एंड द डिटेल्स एंड द ऑथेंटिकेशन एंड द वेरिफिकेशन एंड द प्रिंटिंग आउट ऑफ द वाउचर एंड गेटिंग इट वेरीफाइड, ये सारा काम करना होगा। वंस यू हैव डन इट एंड योर बुक इज क्लियर, बुक या मतलब आपकी अकाउंट्स बुक जब क्लियर हो जाती है, वो स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट है कि आप कंप्लायंसेस को कैसा करें। सो दैट्स नॉट वेरी डिफिकल्ट एक्चुअली। So in remote areas, the compliance in remote areas and areas which are not remote areas में कोई difference नहीं. The compliance is the same. The only thing is you have to decide what is the kind of supporting documents that have to be there. And today ऐसा नहीं है कि रिमोट एरिया के अंदर क्या compliances करनी है उसके बारे में जानकारी नहीं हो सकती. आज से पहले बहुत प्रॉब्लम थी, लेकिन जब से हमने ये मुहिम छेड़ रखी है कि भाई लोगों को पता होना चाहिए रिमोट एरियाज के अंदर, पीपल आर नाउ गेटिंग टू नो एंड दे आर नॉट डिपेंडिंग एंटायरली ऑन कंसल्टेंट्स बिकॉज कंसल्टेंट्स को भी कितना पता है. सेकंड थिंग इज कि आप कहीं जाके पूछ नहीं सकते बिकॉज एवरीथिंग इज फेसलेस टुडे, एवरीथिंग इज ऑनलाइन. सो यू विल हैव टू लर्न द हार्ड वे टू बी एबल टू कंप्लाई. बट रिमोट है या बिगर सिटीज के अंदर है, आई डोंट थिंक इट मेक्स अ डिफरेंस.
Okay, sir. Thanks so much.
Is it possible to get draft of various policies which you have mentioned on PATIC website? If I do that, Monica, then you will only copy paste those policies. Okay. So we don't teach policies here. We teach policies to non-finance people in terms of understanding why policies have to be एडियर टू, क्योंकि वही लोग नहीं समझते. लेकिन हम पॉलिसी का फ्रेमवर्क क्या हो सकता है वो बता सकते हैं, वो भी फाइनेंस की अगर कोई ट्रेनिंग हो तो. बट वी कैनॉट मेक ड्राफ्ट पॉलिसीज बिकॉज एवरी पॉलिसी is specific to an organization and I have some hundreds of policies because I do due diligence and all those policies are cut and paste. जब हम उसको scratch करके और देखते हैं is the policy that has got formulated, is it known to the staff? It's not known. Is it being implemented? It's not being implemented. So for the sake of making a policy, मैं तो कहता हूँ अगर छोटी संस्था है and if it makes a policy of which is just 20 pages based on where it is, because a policy is an evolving document, it's a dynamic document. 25 pages का भी document बनाएगा और वो बोलेगा ये मेरी policy and this is how I am implementing this policy. They are all parts of the policy might not be included in that policy. Good. If I get an HR policy which is 100 pages and the organization is not even following five pages, the chief functionary doesn't know what that policy actually means. Then it is not a policy, but it is really inviting trouble. So we we can only say that a construct of a policy in terms of framework will include this, and I don't have a way to tell you that because मेरे पास पॉलिसी एज सच का क्या होना चाहिए वो डिटेलिंग नहीं है. बट डेफिनेटली वी कैन give you a framework if we design a course like that. All right, so that's all that there is. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you in another batch of another version. We have a version coming up for due diligence and grant management end to end, which is a 5 week course. It's really important, not for raising funds, but for making you ready for raising, for getting funds. You may have a very great proposal, but if you're not ready for the funding in terms of due diligence, then it becomes a very, very difficult proposition. And that is what is actually troubling the small, medium organizations. So very much. Thank you very much. And hope to see you in the future. Thank you.